Welcome back to Birds of a Feather. This is your daily Baltimore sports podcast. My name is Nathan Stroud, and today we've got a lot of stuff to go over regarding both the Baltimore Ravens and the Baltimore Orioles. Obviously, today is Monday, September 29th, which means we are now a day removed officially from the 2025 Baltimore Orioles season. The Orioles season ended yesterday. They played their final game yesterday. And we are now officially on the next day, which means we are officially, for some teams in the MLB, obviously they are looking forward to the playoffs, and unfortunately the Orioles will not be looking forward to the playoffs this year. So it means all the teams that are making the playoffs, today is the day where you kind of officially move on to the offseason in a way. Mike Elias had his post-season press conference, basically his recap of everything, kind of answering questions post-season, because now it is officially over. Obviously, yesterday was the final game. Today is now officially the next step forward throughout this offseason process. And we're going to be going over some stuff that Mike Elias said, going to be going over some stuff that Tony Mansolino also said regarding their thoughts on the season and also just their upcoming, plans and hopes for this offseason and free agency and stuff like that. So there's a lot to go over regarding the Orioles, obviously. We're also going to be doing a full 2025 Orioles season recap. Basically, we're going to kind of go from start to finish, really. We're not going to obviously go over every single game, but we are going to go over the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Obviously, there was a lot of lows this season with the Orioles, and that's going to be a majority, I guess, of what we talk about is the lows. But near the end of the year, if you remember earlier on in September, when you kind of look at that Padres and Dodgers series that happened at like the end of August and early September, that is kind of where the highs for the Orioles were. Also, when you look back at when they first called up Beavers and Basayo, that was a really big time. And then obviously, the back-to-back walk-offs against the Dodgers was probably the biggest high of the season for the Orioles, I would say, just in terms of like a moment. So we'll go over that. We'll kind of discuss the lows, the highs, and everything like that. We're also going to be going into like player evaluations, kind of going over every single player that put on an Orioles uniform this year, giving my thoughts on them, who disappointed, who prevailed, who looked good, what's to be excited for going into next year. Because based on some of the reports yesterday from Bob Nightingale, who said that he expects the Orioles to be the most aggressive team going into pitching this offseason and this free agency. First of all, that made me extremely excited and extremely hopeful for the future. But also, some stuff that Mike Elias said this morning, kind of talking about how they are going to be looking for a general manager. They're also going to be looking for a new GM, but they're also going to be looking for a manager for the club and a manager for the team. And whether that's going to be Tony Mansolino, who is apparently a candidate for rehire, or a candidate to be actually the official head coach, but he did say that they're going to interview other people. But he also said that he's interested in getting like either a 1, 2, or 3 guy for a starting pitcher to pair alongside Rogers and Bradish. So knowing that those two are going to be a big part going into next year, confirmed officially by Elias, is really good to hear. So again, there's a lot to look forward to this offseason for the Orioles, and I really do believe that this offseason is going to be one of the most important offseasons in the history of the Baltimore Orioles, just based off of kind of where they are right now. You saw them kind of surging up for 2 years. Then you had the disappointing year this year based off of bad offseason, based off of injuries, underperformance, all that stuff. And then going into next year, you have all these young guys, you have all these young position players, you got to get the pitching. And if you can do that, and you can find a way to win games and pair these managers up and coaching staff up the right way, things will be looking very, very good. And also in this episode, near the end of it, I do want to go over some Orioles stuff because we did get some major some Ravens stuff. I do want to go over some Ravens stuff because there is some major updates regarding the Baltimore Ravens that we did learn just honestly 15 minutes ago from John Harbaugh. He had his press conference media availability, which I think is actually still going on right now. But John Harbaugh did confirm with the media today in the press conference that Nemandi Madubuike will be out the remainder of the 2025 season, which sucks. I'm not going to lie. It is such a big blow to this defense, and to know now that Madubuike is not going to play the rest of the year because of this neck injury, it's obviously not a good sign at all. he declined really saying much about it, and everybody really declined saying much about it because they knew deep down within the organization, they knew that this was a really serious thing, and we had that same thought. Whenever over the past couple of weeks when we've seen him on the injury report, when we've been hearing the tiny little quotes here and there about his injury, it's not really looking good. First of all, prayers out to Madubuike. Prayers to Madubuike. Hopefully everything is good with him. Hopefully mentally he's taking this okay because, again, when it comes to a neck injury, that's really serious stuff. And the likelihood of him potentially having to hang it up and retire this early in his career is looking more and more likely, especially after the news today of him having to miss the remainder of the season now with this neck injury. At first, he was on the injury report. Maybe we were thinking a couple weeks. Then the other day he got put on the 4-game IR. So we're like, okay, maybe maybe this isn't as bad as we thought. But no, it is as bad as we thought, or maybe it's even worse because he will miss the remainder of this season. Just another big blow to this defense. Also, Marlon Humphrey going to be missing a few weeks with this calf injury. Don't really know any Roquan Smith updates. The Lamar Jackson injury might actually be real, but we'll go over all of that later on in this episode. But first, let's just go over and just take a little trip down memory lane kind of with this 2025 Orioles season recap. So looking here at this 2025 Orioles season recap. Obviously, 162 games later, the Orioles sit at 75-87 on the year. They ended 12 games below 500. They were last place in the AL East, while over the past 2 years, they've been in the top 2. Last year, they obviously were second in the division to the Yankees by only 3 games. It was a division race the entire year last year. And then in 2023, the Orioles were first in the American League East, and they had over 100 wins. So the expectations going into this Orioles season were obviously high based on the past couple of years. You look back at the offseason that the Orioles had, and again, this show wasn't a thing back during the offseason of the Orioles. I started the show on opening day of the Orioles season back on March 27th, but when it came to the Orioles offseason, it was a complete and utter disappointment. Everybody knew it. Every media outlet knew it. Every Orioles fan knew it. Everybody knew that this offseason was just a complete disaster. A lot of fans were calling for Brandon Hyde's head after how our season ended last year when only scoring 1 run in 2 games and the 2 wildcard games against the Royals. But it didn't happen. We kept pretty much everybody. We hired the Seattle Mariners hitting coach from last season when the Mariners had a really hard time hitting the ball, and he was our hitting coach this year, and once again, just underperformance did happen. So I'm sure that we'll get a change in that department of stuff. But when it came to this Orioles season, when it came to this Orioles offseason, obviously they went out this offseason. They lost Anthony Santander and they lost Corbin Burns. Those were the 2 biggest names that the Orioles had going into free agency, and 2 of the biggest names in free agency in general. One of the biggest hitters and one of the biggest pitchers in free agency. So we lose Corbin Burns going to the Diamondbacks. We lose Anthony Santander going to the Blue Jays. And when you look at things as of right now, when you look at things in the bigger picture, when you look at things with 2020 vision, obviously looking back at it, Corbin Burns did get Tommy John. He only had like 5 or 6 starts this year, and he ended up getting Tommy John earlier this year, so he was out the remainder of the season. And Anthony Santander, I don't even know if he played 30 games this year. He was out for a majority of the season due to injury. So, again, when you look at things 2020 vision, I'm not going to sit here and say, thank God we didn't, re-sign these guys, because that's not really how it works. You never know what could have happened if these guys were in a different situation. So it just so happened to be the situation that they're in, with Corbin getting Tommy John, with Santander getting that injury that he had. Obviously, they didn't end up really doing anything for their teams this year, so I guess if Anthony Santander went out there this year and put up like 60 home runs and put up those Cal Raleigh numbers, then you would have kind of really felt really bad deep down inside, but they didn't really do anything for their teams. But with the Orioles, I remember the first move that we really made was like signing Tyler O'Neill to kind of be that Anthony Santander replacement. And Tyler O'Neill didn't even really play a lot of games this year for the Orioles. I don't even know if he really had a 200 average for the Orioles this year. So Tyler O'Neill had a very disappointing year for the Orioles. And again, when we're going to go through kind of the depth chart, we're going to go through the players. We're going to kind of evaluate their seasons now that it's officially over. Now that we have the final numbers for average and home runs and RBIs and OPS and all that stuff. So Tyler O'Neill disappointing year overall for the Orioles. He was kind of signed to be that Anthony Santander replacement. Then you kind of look at the pitching. You lose Corbin Burns. Kyle Bradish we knew Kyle Bradish was gonna miss a majority of the season, and we also knew that like the guys that we knew that we were gonna have were Grayson Rodriguez, Dean Kramer, Zach Eflin, like those guys. Obviously, everything happened with Grayson Rodriguez in spring training, where he ended up aggravating the same injury, and then he was on his way to coming back sometime midway through the season, and then he had a whole different injury, and then he ended up missing the entirety of this season. We do have a Grayson update that we'll go over later on in this little recap, but when it came to the pitchers that the Orioles signed, they signed Charlie Morton, who obviously did not work out. And I did see a video yesterday of Charlie, because when we traded Charlie Morton to the Tigers actually ended up releasing him with like a week left in the season, and the Braves actually ended up picking him up. And Charlie Morton started yesterday, and he only pitched 2 innings, but the manager took him off, and the Braves crowd embraced him because Charlie Morton did play a lot of his career with Atlanta, and I think it was a moment where Charlie Morton is probably going to be retiring after this year, and he's an older guy. He's 40, so it's not too surprising. But great career for Charlie. Just want to give him his flowers there. But Charlie Morton, the Oriole, was a completely different story. Obviously, he started out this season horrible, and then he really did turn it around and really started playing very well. If you kind of took Charlie Morton's time as an Oriole and split it into 2. The first half was atrocious. The second half was actually really good. That's why he ended up getting trade interest by the Tigers, because they saw how he was playing going up to the trade deadline. But again, we signed Charlie Morton, 40-year-old pitcher. We signed Tomoyuki Sagano out of Japan, who is 36 years old. He's a rookie. Signed him. So Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sagano. They signed Andrew Kittredge out of the bullpen. They signed some bullpen guys, some cool little names in here and there. But I ended up getting Felix Bautista back, obviously, which was a big addition. We all know what happened with Felix Bautista. We all know that he ended up tearing his labrum, and we don't even know if he's going to play baseball again at this point. So that's, again, part of the Orioles' offseason plan to go out and try and get a true closer. There's a guy named Edwin Diaz on the market who I wouldn't be mad at if we threw some money at him, but obviously the Orioles' offseason overall was very disappointing. We were kind of banking on the young talent and Gunnar and Adley and Jackson and stuff like that. And if you look at the Orioles' injury report throughout the season, every single player, damn near every single player, touched the injury report sometime this year. Every single position's been hit by injuries for the Orioles this year. We used 7 different catchers this year, which I don't know if they track. I don't know if there's a record for how many, what teams use the most catchers in a single season in MLB history. The Orioles got to be up there. We got to be tied for the record. We got to have the record. I don't know what it is. We use 7 catchers in a season, which is insane. And again, we'll go over the injury stuff in a little bit. But basically what I'm saying is the Orioles offseason was extremely disappointing. You lose James McCann, you signed Gary Sanchez. And Gary Sanchez has had his little Linsanity run this year before he ended up getting hurt. But overall, the Orioles season was just the Orioles offseason was extremely disappointing, which kind of led people to believe that if the Orioles offensive talent didn't really show up this year, then we were going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's kind of exactly what happened. There was a lot of underperformance with this offense throughout the year, but the pitching was also a disaster as well. And for a majority of this year, especially early on throughout the year in the first half, there was no rhythm or anything. Some days that the offense was doing solid, the pitching was atrocious, and then there'd be some days where the pitching was actually pretty decent, but the offense couldn't do anything at all. And then there'd be some days, like, for example, Easter Sunday against the Cincinnati Reds, where you lose 24-2, where nothing is going right with your team. And there was multiple games this year where we got blown out. There was some games this year where we blew out other teams, but there was a lot of games this year where pitching wasn't going good, offense wasn't going good, and quite a bit of the time actually, and there was a lot of real big underperformances for this offense this year, even with the names that were out there. And when it came to the pitching, we knew it was a disaster. The bullpen was solid for a majority of the year before the trade deadline, but the starting pitching was dead last in the league. The Orioles' run differential was extremely high, and just overall, it was a disaster heading into the beginning of the season. But if we kind of look here at the beginning of the year in a way, Zach Eflin obviously was the opening day starter with the Orioles, and as of right now, he did get shut down for the rest of the year because of a back injury. But when you go here and look at kind of the Orioles season as a whole, at least for the first half, we kind of got pulled up right here. Again, first game of the season, the Orioles went into Toronto, on the road into Toronto, and when you look at things from a perspective right now, Toronto ended up winning the American League East. So Toronto ended up being a powerhouse this year, and they didn't even have probably like their biggest free agent signing the entire year. Like Anthony Santander, they threw a lot of money at him, and he didn't even really play for the Blue Jays this year, and I don't think he's going to play in the playoffs for them. But the Blue Jays ended up having, I think they had the best record of the American League this season, and they ended up winning the American League East. So shout out to the Blue Jays. They did their thing this year. I obviously wanted them to win this division a lot more than the Yankees did, and the Yankees didn't end up winning the division, but they still obviously made the playoffs. But going into the first game of the year, the Orioles ended up getting a 10-run win over the Blue Jays. And obviously the Blue Jays ended up winning the division. Obviously the Blue Jays ended up having an amazing year. So looking back at this in the first game of the year, it's kind of funny. If we go over to kind of just looking at the box score real quick from the first game of the year, there's a lot of names on here. There's some names on here that aren't even here anymore. There's some name and stuff like that, and especially when it comes to the pitching. But the Orioles in the first game of the year won 12-2 over the Blue Jays. They started off 1-0. Things were looking great. Nice little 10-run win. I remember Adley Rutschman in this game had 2 home runs. Cedric Mullins in this game had 2 home runs. Tyler O'Neill had a home run. Jordan Westburg had a home run. So the Orioles in this game hit 6 home runs. 2 from Cedric, 2 from Adley, 1 from Tyler O'Neill, and 1 from Jordan Westburg. And it was a very, very cool thing to see. And if you go back and actually look at game 1 of the year, Jackson Holliday was batting 9th. And Jackson Holliday, obviously, over time, eventually became the Orioles' main leadoff guy. I don't know how that's going to look going into next year, but when it comes to the Orioles hitters, like in this game, Colton Cowser was leading off in game 1 of the year because Gunnar Henderson wasn't playing early on in the year. Gunnar Henderson, I don't think he played the first week of the season because of that injury he sustained in spring training. But when you kind of just look at this, like obviously with Ryan O'Hearn, Orioles legend, you've got Ramon Laureano, who didn't even play in this game. He's obviously an Orioles legend because Ramon Laureano ended up being like a rotational guy for the Orioles when we signed him. Like when we signed Ramon Laureano, he was going to be a rotational outfielder, and he ended up being an every single day player. And then we traded him to the Padres alongside Ryan O'Hearn, and I think actually right now Ramon Laureano is hurt, so he's going to miss like the wild card series. But still, Ramon Laureano was an elite player. For the Orioles this year and for the Padres. And also, speaking of the Padres and speaking of kind of the playoffs in the wildcard series, I do want to know what teams y'all are going to be rooting for. If you guys are Orioles fans, who y'all are going to be rooting for in this playoff series. So make sure to drop a comment on that. I was going to kind of root for the Mets if the Mets made it in because I wanted to see Cedric succeed. But the Mets are not going to be making the playoffs, so that's that. But a team that I really want to see succeed in these playoffs is the San Diego Padres. Because, again, they have Ryan O'Hearn, they have Manny Machado, and they have Ramon Laureano. 3 guys who are Orioles legends. Ryan O'Hearn wasn't here for an extremely long time, but he made an extreme impact in the past few years he was here. Ramon Laureano was literally only here for half a season, but he was such a fan favorite over this half a season for the Orioles. He was incredible. And then Manny Machado, I mean, that one's obvious. The Orioles drafted him. He's an Orioles legend. We understand how good he is. And seeing him win his first ring would be really, really, really cool to see. So I'm really rooting for Manny all the way here. or just seeing Manny win a ring would be really cool to see, especially with him being kind of one of the bigger leaders on that Padres team. So really rooting for those three guys. Trying to think of some other guys that we traded that are in the playoffs right now. So Anthony Dominguez is on the Blue Jays. Obviously, Gregory Soto is on the Mets, so they didn't make it. Cedric Mullins is on the Mets. They didn't make it. Charlie Morton, he was on the Tigers, but he's gone now. Brian Baker went to the Rays. They didn't make it. Who else? Who else did we trade with? Ramon Urias went to the Astros, but the Astros didn't make it. So, again, and when you go back and look at Week 1, when you go back and look at Game 1 of the year, there's a lot of names on here that didn't end up actually playing the entire time, but again, we won by 10 runs in Game 1 of the year, and I said Week 1, thinking back to the NFL, but we won by 10 runs here, which is really, really cool to see, and then we lose Game 2, so we split the opening series of the year. It was a 4-game series against Toronto. We ended up splitting that series 2-2. And then we kind of just moved on throughout the year as everything went on. Again, you kind of had this 3-game losing streak here, this first real, impact of the year right here where we had this 3-game losing streak. And after this losing streak, the Orioles were sitting at 3-5 on the year. So again, we were below 500 for literally the entire year. I actually want to see how long we were below 500, and also we kind of look at some of these starts. Like Zach Eflin had a really good start to the year. You kind of see the loss. Like you see Charlie Morton's first loss of the year. What did Charlie Morton do? No, I don't want to look at that. I want to kind of look at Charlie Morton's first loss of the year against Toronto. In Charlie Morton's first game, 3 innings, 4 runs. Again, that was a classic early Orioles Charlie Morton start there. But when you kind of look at this, again, they had this 3-game losing streak here. They were sitting at 3-5, 4-5, 4-6. Like they couldn't really get on a rhythm at all. And then let's see, after April 17th, the Orioles were sitting at 8-10. So again, they were kind of playing from behind a little bit. They were kind of on the verge of being 500. They were kind of on that 8-10 mark, 9-11 mark, 10-12 mark. They were kind of sitting either 1 game above 500, either 500 or a couple games below it. And they were like that for the first pretty much month of the year. After the first full month of the season, if we look here at April 27th, after the first full month of the season, the Orioles were sitting at 10-17. And this is where things really started to slip away with the Orioles. Obviously, you look at this game, they lose 7-0 to the Detroit Tigers, but after the first month of the year, obviously from March 27th to April 27th, we were sitting at 10-17. So in the first 27 games of the year, we were sitting at 10-17. And again, this is where things started to slip. It started to slip really early in this season. We were 7 games below 500, and to be honest with you, from there was really no coming back. I mean, you look at April 27th, we can go from April 27th to May 27th here against St. Louis. Now, at this point, the Orioles are 19-35. So after the first month of the year, we were 10-17. In the first month of the season, we were 10-17, and then after the first 2 months of the season, we were 19-35. So all of a sudden, we are 16 games below 500. So after the first month, we're 7 games below 500. After 2 months, we're 16 games below 500. So again, this wasn't like a mid-season collapse. This wasn't a second-half collapse. This really was we started collapsing within the first couple of weeks of the season, and we were never able to recover. There was never any rhythm with this offense, never any consistency with the pitching. It was a complete and utter disaster class from the get-go of this season. The minute we were below 500, it was over. We were cooked from there in the first couple of weeks. So after 2 months, we're 16 games below 500, and then after 3 months, we were, after 3 months of the season, we were 35-46. So after 1 month, 7 games below 500. After 2 months, we're 16 games below 500. And then after 3 months, we kind of pushed it back to being 11 games below 500. So a little bit better, cut the deficit a tiny bit. But again, and if you were watching these episodes throughout the year, when we were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games below 500, I was always saying, like, all they got to do is just cut the lead, go on a good stretch here, cut the lead as down as much as they can, and just try and be in a good position going into All-Star break. That was always what I would say. And they just never did it. They would cut it down a little bit. Obviously, if you look at, like, from that month difference, they were 16 games below 500. Now they're 11 games below 500. So they cut it down a little bit, but it was just never enough to, like, consistently actually cut it down and get to where they needed to be. So the Orioles are sitting here at 35-46 after the first 3 months of the season. And then we went into All-Star break. I remember we were playing Miami in the last series of the year, and we won the first game and then got destroyed the next two. And then I think the third game is when Kyle Stowers had 3 home runs on us. But going into All-Star break, we had a record of 43-52. So going into All-Star break, we cut our deficit down to 9 games. So again, after the first month of the year, 7 games, then it was like 16 games, then it was like 11 games, and then going into All-Star break a couple weeks later, we cut our lead down to 9 games. So we were within single digits below 500. We were 9 games below 500 going into All-Star break. There was a small sliver of a chance that I thought that we were going to maybe get back into the season. And obviously that did not happen. We started off the second half of the season, and it just did not go well. You go here. We lost, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We lost 5 of the first 6 games of the we literally lost 5 of the first 6 games of the second half. And then after we lost 5 of the first 6 games, we were sitting at a record of 44-57. We were 13 games below 500, right back to that sweet spot that we were for majority of the year. And from there, you kind of had to think, like, okay, we're 13 games below 500. It's July 24th. We're cooked. The trade deadline was like in a week from then. I think the trade deadline was the 31st of July. So, I mean, we were cooked, and I was just hoping at that point that Mike Elias was going to pull the trigger on these trades and kind of just punt the season. And that's exactly what happened. Obviously, you look back at the trade deadline. We ended up trading Ramon Laureano and Brian O'Hearn to the Padres. We ended up trading Cedric Mullins and Gregory Soto to the Mets. We ended up trading Brian Baker earlier in this season to the Rays. Traded Charlie Morton to the Tigers. Traded Ramon Urias to the Astros. Traded Seranthony Dominguez to the Mets. To the Blue Jays. And I'm trying to think of any other trades that we made. It traded Andrew Kittredge to the Cubs, who's actually still in the Cubs right now. So that is a an Oriole that you can maybe root for these playoffs. So I'm trying to think, who else did we trade? I think all the guys that I named were pretty much all the guys we ended up actually trading. I know all the position players are who we traded. With the pitching, I mean, our bullpen was like completely washed. After the trade deadline, we completely just traded everyone out of the bullpen. Zach Eflin was a big trade candidate, but he was dealing with an injury, so I don't think a lot of teams wanted to trade for him. So again, we got to the trade deadline of the year, which was July 31st, and then the start of August, from August 1st to obviously September 28th. That was the Orioles post-trade deadline. And if you go here, we literally, I remember the first game of the trade, post-trade deadline, the first game we had, it was actually Jeremiah Jackson's MLB debut here. He was batting ninth in this game. He ended up getting a hit in his first game, so we kind of knew, okay, this kid was going to be maybe something special. But I remember the first game post-trade deadline, and this is such an Orioles-coded thing. We traded Cedric, we traded Ryan O'Hearn, we traded Ramon Urias, we traded Ramon Laureano, so we traded some really good hitters for the Orioles this year. And then in our first game after the trade deadline, we lose 1-0 to the Chicago Cubs. Andrew Kittredge actually pitched for the Cubs in this game. But if y'all remember, Trevor Rogers in this game pitched 8 innings, gave up 1 run in 8 innings, had 8 strikeouts. He was the only pitcher that pitched for the Orioles, and we lost 1-0 in Chicago, which was just so embarrassing. And that's just how they ended up starting off the post-trade deadline era for the Orioles. And that's how it started, and it was just so disappointing. And then they ended up getting and then in Game 3 on the rubber match, they ended up getting walked off by Justin Turner. We all remember that. Again, we all remember the 24-2 loss to the Reds, but we also had a really big 22-8 win over the Rays. And then if you go up here against the Rockies, we had a big 18-0 win over the Rockies in this game. Who was pitching for the Orioles? Trevor Rogers, of course. 7 innings, 0 runs, absolute masterclass from Trevor, like we saw all year long. Again, we are going to go over kind of some players' stats here in just a second. But I think this was the biggest shutout in Orioles history, which was really cool to see. They had 3 home runs in this game. They had 1 from Tyler O'Neill, 1 from Austin Jackson, and 1 from Cedric Mullins. So, again, great game here. One of the highs of the season. There's a ton of lows, a ton of blowouts that we were in throughout this year. I remember the Boston game where it was close, and then it wasn't. So. Post-trade deadline Orioles, you lose 3 in a row here, you lose 1 to Chicago, and then you lose the first 2 to Philly. Have another 3-game losing streak here, 2 to the A's and 1 to the Mariners. Then you kind of go on a decent little run right here. You win 6 of 7. You win the series against Seattle, and then you win the series against Houston, and then you also take the first 2 games against Boston, or sweep Boston technically. So you kind of won 6 of 7 games here in this stretch, right here. Then you lose 3 of 4 to the Astros. So then you lose 3 of 4 to the Houston Astros. Then after you lose, and this was really a stretch that was then followed up by some really cool things, but. This stretch right here was horrible. You win 6 of 7 right here, and then you lose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you lose 8 of 9. You lose 3 of 4 to the Astros, then you get swept in a 4-game series to Boston, then you lose the first game of the series to San Francisco, 15-8. And that game was on national TV as well. So you look here. They lost 8 of 9 games in this stretch right here, and then after that they they lost the series to San Francisco, and then they sweat, and then this stretch right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then they ended up winning 8 of 9 right here, and when they won 8 of 9, it was against some really good teams. They swept San Diego in San Diego. They swept the Padres on the road in San Diego, and then they ended up taking 2 of 3 from the Dodgers, and we all remember this game right here. In my opinion, this is one of the greatest wins of the season. In my opinion, this is one of the best wins. In my opinion, this arguably is the best win of any team in the MLB this season. And I'm not saying that to be biased. I'm saying that because of the situation that we were in. The Orioles were getting no hit in this game. If y'all don't remember, the Orioles were getting no hit in this game for 8.2 innings. For 8.2 innings, the Orioles were getting no hit. Yoshinobu Yamamoto was throwing a no-hitter for 8.2 innings. And then Jackson Holliday was the last batter of the game. At the time, he was the last batter of the game. It was all down to him to avoid getting no hit. And at the end of the day, when you kind of look back at this as well, there was nobody in the MLB this season that threw a no-hitter. So there was no team that threw a no-hitter this entire year. Not a solo no-hitter, not a team no-hitter. There was 0 no-hitters in baseball this year, which was crazy. But this is the closest anyone got. The Dodgers were throwing a no-hitter for 8.2 innings of this game. It was all up to Jackson Holliday. He ended up hitting a home run that barely went over the left center field wall, really just the left field wall. Barely went over, the right field wall. I remember it barely went over the right center field wall. Jackson Holliday barely hit a home run in that game, which ended the no-hitter. But at the time, the Orioles were losing 3-0. So the Dodgers were winning 3-0 over the Orioles. The Orioles were getting no hit for 8.2 innings. Jackson Holliday hit the solo home run, which made it 3-1, but still there was 2 outs in the inning, nobody on base. We were getting no hit for the entire game up until that point, and then with 1 out remaining, Jeremiah Jackson, I remember, ended up getting a base hit. Daniel Johnson ended up getting on base. Gunnar Henderson ended up getting on base, and then Emmanuel Rivera ended up walking off the Dodgers. It was bases loaded. It was bases loaded with 2 outs, down by we were down by 1, and then Emmanuel Rivera got a base hit up the middle, and the Orioles ended up winning that game and walking off the Dodgers when they were getting no hit for 8.2 innings and down by 3 runs. So that was an electric win, an absolute electric win. I still can't even believe that happened. But I mean, we also won this series against the Dodgers, and we also swept the Padres previously. And the night before this electric walk-off, Samuel Basallo actually walked off the Dodgers the night before with his first home run in Camden Yards, and it was also his first walk-off in general. He hit the home run. And then Samuel Basallo in the month of September actually had 2 walk-offs. He walked off the... who did he end up walking off? I think he ended up walking off the... It was the Pirates, yeah. He ended up walking off the Pirates in Game 3 of that series. So Samuel Basallo ended up walking off the Pirates. He also walked off the Dodgers. So Basallo ended up having 2 walk-offs in the month of September. And then also, going back to this Houston series, on August 16th, this was the first game that Dylan Beavers played. So Dylan Beavers and Samuel Basallo were obviously 2 guys that Orioles fans, including myself, were all hoping and praying they got called up to the team. We were all so excited to see them on the Orioles roster. And they ended up getting called up. They ended up coming to the team. Dylan Beavers ended up getting his first game played in Houston on the road. Dylan Beavers went 1 for 5 in this game. I was actually at this game as well, which is really cool. But Dylan Beavers ended up getting his first hit in his first game. So Beavers got called up, and then the very next day, we ended up calling up Samuel Basallo when the Orioles won 12-0. Samuel Basallo in this game ended up getting his first hit and RBI in this game. He went 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs in this game. So when we called up Basallo, when we called up Beavers, it was obviously very, very, very exciting. And that is one of the things that I say, like when I'm looking forward to next season. A big reason why I'm looking forward to next season is because of the fact we have Beavers, we have Basallo, we have Jeremiah Jackson, who ended up being, a big part of our team when we didn't really think he was going to be, and then also obviously the expectations for this upcoming offseason. So overall, there were some highs, there were some lows throughout this year, but overall the Orioles ended up 75-87. They were last place in the American League East, but better days should be ahead. Now, going over the stats of the year, I'm kind of going to go through like some major like categories like games played and hits and home runs, RBIs, walks, strikeouts, average, all that stuff. So, first of all, going to kind of have this sorted out throughout the entire season in general. But when we kind of go here and look at the batting splits, we're going to start off with this first. Obviously, we can go to and quickly look here at the team leaders, where Gunnar Henderson was the team leader in every major category for hitting. Gunnar was the batting average leader. Gunnar was the home run leader with 17. 17 home runs was the leader on the team, which is kind of insane. Ryan O'Hearn ended up having 20+, and I think Cedric Mullins ended up having 20+, and Ramon Laureano ended up having, I think, 24 on the year. And we traded all 3 of them, so all of them would have technically been our home run leader if they were still on our team. But for the Orioles that were on the team by the end of the year, Gunnar Henderson was the home run leader with 17. 17 home runs for Gunnar. I think Gunnar had 17 home runs in a month and a half last year. It's just kind of crazy how much things dropped off. But again, he still was young. He still has so much left. And I'm not even going to sit here and say like, oh my God, Gunnar did so bad, because he literally led us in every major category. So Gunnar was the batting average leader with 274. Gunnar was the home run leader. He was the RBI leader. He was the on-base percentage leader, and he was the hits leader. So 158 hits for Gunnar. He had an on-base percentage of 349. He was the RBI leader with 68, and the home run leader with 17. So when we go here and look here, we can kind of look at games played. And when you kind of look at this now, it really does show like how much this team was decimated with injuries throughout the season. And I'm talking about the Orioles that are currently on the team as of right now. And it really does show like, wow, and like they went through a lot of injuries this season for sure. I mean, you can just see it here from the games played. Gunnar Henderson played the most games on the Orioles. He had 154, or he appeared in 154 games this season for the Orioles. Jackson Holliday played in 149 games. So Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday were the two workhorses for the Orioles this season. Gunnar Henderson didn't really deal with any injury other than the one to start the season. Jackson Holliday didn't deal with anything at all this whole year. He either got kind of sat early on in the year or, a couple rest days here and there. But Gunnar Henderson with 154 games and Jackson Holliday with 149 games played. So these two guys were the workhorses throughout the year. We also understand that Gunnar and Jackson are going to be kind of the two main pillars of this Orioles team and, leaders moving forward into the future with this franchise. We understand that. And they also happen to be the two guys that played the most amount of games this year. So Gunnar and Jackson played pretty much 150 games both this year, which is nice to see from them. But then you kind of go to the third most games played, and it's Ryan O'Hearn with 94. Ryan O'Hearn got traded on trade deadline day back in July. On July 31st is when we traded Ryan O'Hearn. So Ryan O'Hearn appeared in a lot of Orioles games all the way up. He pretty much appeared in every Orioles game up until the trade deadline where we traded him. But Ryan O'Hearn appeared in the third most amount of Orioles games this year, and he got traded at the deadline. So if that doesn't kind of show you that this team dealt with injuries, I don't know what will. Ryan O'Hearn appeared in the third most games for the Orioles this year. Colton Cowser appeared in the fourth most games with 92. Obviously, he dealt with that he dealt with that thumb issue for a majority of the beginning of this season. He suffered that injury, I think, in the third or second game of the year, and he was out for a few months, and then he ended up coming back and pretty much being someone who played every day from then on. But Colton Cowser played 92 games. Cedric Mullins, who isn't on the team anymore, played 91 games. Adley Rutschman played 90 games. Ryan Mountcastle played 89. Kobe Mayo played 85. Jordan Westbrook played 85. Dylan Carlson played 83. Ramon Laureano, who isn't on the team anymore, played 82. Ramon Urias, who isn't on the team anymore, played 77. Heston Kjerstad played 54. Tyler O'Neill played 54. Tyler O'Neill played 54 games this year out of 162. I mean, yeah. Tyler O'Neill played 54. Jeremiah Jackson played 48. He pretty much played every single game since the deadline. Shout out to Jeremiah Jackson. Jorge Mateo played 43. Emmanuel Rivera played 42. Alex Jackson played 36. Shout out Alex Jackson. Dylan Beavers played 35. Luis Vasquez played 32. Samuel Basayo played 31. Gary Sanchez played 29. Daniel Johnson, who isn't on the team, played 17. Maverick Candley played 16. Jacob Stollids played 14. Jordan Adams played 10. Greg Allen played 7. Ryan Noda played 7. Chadwick Tromp played 6. Mancine played 4. And then Taron Vivara, Brujan, Vanelos, Hummel, and Ball played 1. So that was kind of the majority of, that was all the position players that suited up for the Orioles this season. I know it was a lot. The Orioles went through a lot of different players. If you kind of look at a name list of players that have played for the Orioles and suited up for the Orioles batting wise in 1 year, our graphic is going to look a hell of a lot different than a majority of other teams' graphics because we had, again, a ton of injuries. We had a bunch of different players rotating in, out of AAA, off of AAA, obviously signing random guys off, from that was available on free agency, signing guys on the waiver, all that stuff. So our graphic is going to look at a lot different than other people's, but I kind of wanted to highlight that, just kind of showing, one, the injuries. Other than Gunnar Henderson and Jackson Holliday, no other Oriole played 100 games in a season. Colton was close with 92, and then obviously Ryan O'Hearn and Cedric Mullins both played 90, but they're not even on the team anymore because they got traded at the deadline. But no Oriole played 100-plus games other than Gunnar and Jackson, who both played around 150. So just kind of showing the scale of how bad the injuries were this year, and kind of the availability just wasn't there for a lot of these major guys. But going over here to the hit totals throughout the year. Gunnar Henderson had 158 hits, Jackson Holliday had 142 hits, and then nobody else had 100 hits on the Orioles. Just like the games played, Gunnar had 158 hits, Jackson had 142 hits. Nobody else had 100 hits as an Oriole. Ryan O'Hearn had 88 hits just as an Oriole. Jordan Westbrook at 87. Ryan Mountcastle at 83. Ramon Laureano at 75. Cedric Mullins at 72. Adley at 71. So, again, not a crazy amount. Like a couple guys like Tyler O'Neill had 36 hits in 54 games. Kobe Mayo had 57 hits in 85 games. So like some of these, stats aren't necessarily like great just in terms of average that we'll go over in a second. But like Basayo had 18 hits in 31 games, which isn't horrible. Beavers had 25 hits in 35 games, which isn't horrible. But again, so like that's the hit metric. For doubles, we'll kind of just go over like top three. Gunnar had 35 doubles, Holiday had 21 doubles, Cedric Mullins had 19, Mountcastle had 18. So again, Gunnar and Jackson are pretty much going to be leading in every stat because again they played far more games than anyone else. Gunnar had 154, Jackson 150. Nobody else played 100. So there was a couple of 90s and 80s here, but it just showed like how available Gunnar and Jackson was. So shout out to them. So triple leaders. Gunnar had 5 triples. Jackson had 3 triples. Jeremiah Jackson had 2 triples. Adley had 2 triples. Heston had 2 triples. So that's pretty cool. The home run leaders. This is where it's actually kind of funny. So not a single Oriole this year hit 20 home runs. Not an Oriole didn't hit 19 home runs or 18 home runs, but we had 3 guys who had 17 home runs, 1 with 16, 2 with 15, 1 with 13, and 1 with 11, and then nobody else had double digits. So when you go over and looking at the home runs here, we only had 1, 2, 3, 4 in the time as a Baltimore Oriole. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 people hit double-digit home runs as an Oriole this year, and none of them eclipsed 20. None of them even eclipsed 18. But Gunnar, Jordan, and Jackson all had 17 home runs on the year. Colton Cowser had 16. Ramon Laureano had 15. Cedric Mullins had 15. Ryan O'Hearn had 13. Kobe Mayo had 11. And then Adley and Tyler both had 9. Ramon Urias had 8. Dylan Carlson had 7. Ryan Mountcastle had 7. Dylan Carlson had 6. Alex Jackson had 5. Jeremiah Jackson had 5. Gary Sanchez had 5. And then Basayo... Beavers, and Kerstad all had 4. So in terms of home runs, obviously it was more spread out between 7 or 8 guys, but none of them had elite home run hitting numbers like other teams did. Like Cal Raleigh had 60 home runs, Judge had 52, Shohei had 52. Like Schwarber had 55. So and even last year, when you go back to last season, we can literally go and look here at the 2020 for regular season. Anthony Santander had 44 home runs, Gunnar had 37, and Colton had 24. So when you look, and obviously the games played is a lot different. When you go look at last year's games played, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 players play over 100 games for the Orioles last year, and this year we had 2 players play over 100 games for the Orioles. Just showing how much of a difference that this actually is. When you go over to RBIs, Gunnar had 68 RBIs, Jackson had 55, Cedric had 49, Ramon had 46, Ryan O'Hearn had 43. All 3 of those guys aren't on the team anymore. Jordan had 41, Colton had 40. So those were kind of the RBI leaders. When you look at walks, Gunnar had the most walks again. And again, Gunnar and Jackson are literally going to be 1 and 2 in every category because they played so many more games than other people. Gunnar had 62, Jackson had 56, Ryan O'Hearn had 42, Adley had 40. So the walk leaders are there. When you go here and look at the strikeouts, Jackson had 140 strikeouts and Gunnar had 137 strikeouts. Colton Cowser had 128 strikeouts in 92 games. That's kind of impressive, to be honest with you. So Colton Cowser, in terms of average and strikeouts, was not great. He only had a 196 average on the year. He had 128 strikeouts in 92 games and 128 strikeouts in 327 at bats. So not the greatest metric there for Colton. That's above a 35% strikeout rate. So those are all the strikeout leaders. Stolen base leaders. Gunnar Henderson had 30 stolen bases, which led the club. Jackson had 17. Jorge Mateo had 15. Colton had 15. Colton had 14. Cedric had 14. And Colton Cowser also had 14. So those were the stolen base guys. Nobody else even was close to double digits other than these 5 guys. Average leaders. This is a big one. So these are the average leaders overall. It says Bruhan has a 1,000 average. That's not. I mean, he literally only had one at bat. So, but Ramon Laureano led the Orioles in batting average this year with a 290. Ryan O'Hearn had a 283 average. Jeremiah Jackson had a 276 average. Gunnar Henderson had a 274. Jordan Westberg had a 265. Emmanuel Rivera had a 250. Shout out to him. Ryan Mountcastle had a 250. Ramon Urias had a 248. Jackson Holliday had a 242. Gary Sanchez had a 231. Cedric Mullins had a 229. Dylan Beavers had a 227. Adley had a 220, so again, a very disappointing year for Adley overall. And again, we extended Samuel Basallo on that 8-year, $68 million deal, and everyone had the questions of what's going to go on with Adley. I am going to have some quotes for you in a little bit from Roach, who again is a huge, Orioles mass and contributor. He has some quotes. I'll just kind of say one of them right now. Mike Elias did say that Adley Rutschman is going to be the frontline catcher for the future, which is a little confusing because they just signed a catcher for 8 years. But again, Basallo can play first. He can also DH and obviously can play catcher, so they'll kind of move him around like that. But that was a little confusing. And Adley's had back-to-back really disappointing years. Adley did only play 90 games this year when he usually plays like easily over 150 every year or like 140. So his availability wasn't really there. But even in the games that he did play, he really did struggle once again, just like he did last year with the 220 average and only 9 home runs. Alex Jackson had a 220. Daniel Johnson had a 217. But going down here, like Tyler O'Neill had a 199 average. Colton Cowser had a 196. Kobe Mayo had a 217, which, he really did increase it in the month of September. But kind of going on here, Samuel Basallo ended the year off on a 165 average. Like I said a few weeks ago, or like a month ago really, Samuel Basallo is the youngest player in Major League Baseball. He is the youngest position player in baseball. He literally turned 21 like 3 days before he got called up. So he is barely 21. He's the youngest player in baseball. So let's chill out on the guy. We saw him hit 2 walk-offs this year, including a walk-off moonshot against the Dodgers. We know how hard he hits the ball. We know what his average exit velo is. We understand how hard he hits the ball. So let's chill out on him. He has some work to do as a catcher. He played a couple games at first base. He has some work to do there. But in terms of a hitter, he is going to be elite. We just got to give him a full spring training and got to give him time to have a full year. And the last thing that I want to go over and look at is the WAR, because obviously WAR is wins above replacement. It is a big stat that kind of shows your impact overall. This is offense, defense, everything. Your full contributions to a team, kind of overall your WAR, your worth and stuff like that. So Gunnar Henderson had a 5.4 WAR. He led the team. Ramon Laureano had a 3. Ryan O'Hearn had a 2. Adley had a 1.9. Jordan Westbrook had a 1.5. Again, catchers' WAR usually is pretty high just because a catcher is an extremely important position. Like outfielders aren't really going to have a high WAR because it's not like an incredibly hard position according to baseball Fangraphs and stuff. What I actually wanted to look at is the players who had a negative WAR or the players who had a 0 WAR. Like Cedric Mullins had a 0 WAR. Basallo had a negative 0.2 WAR. Gary Sanchez had a negative 0.4 WAR. Tyler O'Neill had a negative 0.6 WAR. And then Heston Kjerstad in his 54 games had a negative 1.6 WAR. So not great from the WAR statistics there. I do want to go over and look at the pitching here. Innings pitched, Dean Kramer had the most innings pitched of any Oriole. Then it was Sagano, then it was Povich, then it was Rogers, then it was Morton, then Eflin, Aiken, and then obviously these are bullpen guys. But from the starting pitchers, Kramer, Sagano, Povich, Rogers, Morton, Eflin, those were the leaders in starting pitching this year. In terms of what I want to look at, home runs, Sagano gave up 33, Dean Kramer gave up 22, Eflin gave up 18, Povich gave up 17. So, Sagano giving up 33, that is an insane number. Walk leaders, Morton had 48 walks in 23 games. Morton had 48 walks in 23 games, which is crazy. Kramer had 45 walks. Going over to the total strikeouts, which is what I wanted to look at. Dean Kramer had 142 strikeouts. Cade Povich had 118. Sagano had 106. Rogers had 103. And Morton had 101. So these are the four guys that really eclipsed 100 strikeouts this year with the Orioles. Going over to their WHIP, which is obviously walks and hits per inning. Tyler Wells with a .8 WHIP. He was elite. Trevor Rogers a .9 WHIP again. .9 WHIP in 18 starts is insane. Obviously, Rogers ended off the year kind of on a low note with a really bad start against the Yankees, but literally for 17 of his 18 starts, he was elite all season. Really, of like 16 of 18 starts, he was elite, but a .9 WHIP for a starting pitcher is crazy. Cal Bradish had like a 1.03. Dean Kramer had like a 1.21. So the whips for these guys weren't really great, but this was like elite numbers here. And then the ERA, again, these guys don't really count here, but like Cade Stroud had a 1.7 whip. So Cade Stroud in 25 games actually was very solid for the Orioles in 26 innings. Trevor Rogers a 181. Suarez a 231. Jose Castillo a 245. Kyle Bradish with the 253 in his 6 games that he had. Felix Bautista with the 260 before he went down. And then you kind of get down here to the bottom. You have Emmanuel Rivera with a 72 ERA. Obviously, position players don't really count here, but Kyle Gibson in his 4 starts as an Oriole had a 16.7 ERA. That was a time. That was definitely a time. Brandon Young had a 6.2 ERA. Zach Eflin had a 5.9. Cade Povich had a 5.2. Sagano at a 4.6. Like, just not great numbers at all for those guys, pitching-wise. But, again, we all know that Bradish, Rogers are going to be 2 elite names heading into the future with this pitching staff. Now I wanted to get to some stuff that has to do with the post-season press conference that Mike Elias had from today. Tony Mansolino also was a part of this press conference. He said that he'd consider anything if the Orioles offered him a deal to be obviously the future manager for the Orioles. Do I think that Tony Mansolino should be the future manager of the Orioles? Obviously, he was the interim manager for a majority, obviously, of the season. Do I think that he should be the full-time manager moving forward? No. No, I don't think that Tony Mansolino should be the guy. I think that maybe we should hire him for him to be in the organization. He's a great guy, but from what I heard from him, just the way that he talks, and not even just that, just overall, the vibe and just what this team needs. Not anything against Tony Mansolino, but what this team needs is like a true leader that's going to get them right. And I just don't think Mansolino is that guy. Shout out to him for managing this team, obviously, for the rest of this year. And, it wasn't great, but at the same time, he did his thing. It was better than Hyde, I'll say that. But going over to kind of the stuff that people were saying, Mansolino said he's told under consideration to stay. He's just told under consideration to stay. Nothing more, doesn't know if leaving the Orioles. He said that he'd consider anything if the Orioles offered, which is interesting. Mansolino said that he'd interview that he would interview for the manager's job if he was asked. Has received some advice not to because he's been interviewing since becoming the interim. But who knows? And then Mike Elias obviously took the rest of the show. Lots of questions for Mike, lots of questions about this team, lots of questions about the future of this team and this upcoming offseason that's extremely important. And Mike Elias said that Tony Mansolino will be a real candidate, but they will interview other people, which is good to hear. I want the Orioles to hire an out-of-organization guy, somebody who's going to come into this Orioles team and really lead these guys and change the culture and kind of have a culture shock, change the culture, have an identity as a team, and move forward from there. Because it does kind of feel like this Orioles identity just isn't there. And I think that a lot of GMs, I'm sure there is a ton of bench coaches of teams out there and well-respected players out there in the league. I haven't really dug too deep into that. I definitely will starting now in terms of out-of-organization hires that we could possibly have for manager. I'm sure there's a ton of guys out there that would die to be on this Orioles team and would die to be the manager of this Orioles team because there's so much young talent. There's so much to unlock with this Orioles team as well. There's so much young talent. There's two incredible pitchers that we know in Rogers and Bradish. So the pieces are there. It's kind of like a treasure chest. You have all of this young talent, not only on the Orioles currently on the team, but also in our farm system as well. You have so many young players there and lots of talent there as well. You look back at that Padres trade where they gave you so many assets and stuff like that. So there's a ton of really young, great talent in the farm and also some young, great talent on the team as of right now. So any manager and player and bench coach and stuff, I think would love to be a part of this team. So we'll see what direction they go there. Mike Elias said that the Orioles have started to explore a GM hire. It may not happen right away, but maybe it'll happen this offseason. Maybe this offseason. Okay, well, that's... hopefully we get a manager this offseason, of course, because Mike Elias, if you guys did not know, he was the GM for the Orioles for, the past, 5, 6, 7, 8 years? No, like 6 years or something. And Mike... obviously, his first extension he ever did was with Basayo, but Mike Elias is now the president of baseball operations for the Orioles, so technically he got a promotion. Obviously, all of us wanted Mike Elias to get out, but Mike Elias, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. For those of y'all who don't like Mike Elias, well, he technically has more power now in terms of, baseball operations, but he's no longer the GM. So, which means he's not going to be the one making decisions and going out and trying to get people on his team, which is, I guess a good thing because maybe when we bring in a new GM, obviously I hope that they will be very aggressive. But, we'll see what happens with that. Going over here, Mike Elias said he's not announcing any moves with the coaching staff because it's too early. He said that Heston Kjerstad is working with doctors on a medical condition. He said he's doing well. Elias wouldn't go into details, but he thinks Kjerstad will be at spring training. So that is good to see. It says the Orioles could hire a manager before GM. So we could hire our team manager before GM. He said it's all about timing. Manager search has its own timetable, and the O's want one as soon as possible. So we might see the Orioles get a manager here within the next, 3 weeks to a month or so, because I'm sure that is obviously from what Mike Elias said, that is what they're most interested in doing, is going out and actually getting a manager ASAP, quote unquote. Mike Elias also said that he wants a strong top half, and this was one of the things that really excited me from what he said. He said that Elias wants a strong top half of rotation starters, whether a 1, 2, or a 3 to go with Bradish and Rogers. So he wants to pair Bradish and Rogers with either, an elite pitcher that's better than them or someone that's they want an elite 1, 2, or 3 in this free agency. Because obviously you look at starting pitchers, and throughout this offseason, we're going to kind of go over who's available, who I'd love to see, some predictions, some guys I think that we should go after, and stuff like that. We're going to go over that eventually sometime this offseason. But when you kind of look at starting pitchers on the market, and just guys in general, you can kind of label them as a 1, 2, or a 3, or a 4, or a 5. Just guys that's a back-end starter, a high-end starter, a mid-rotation starter, guys like that. So Mike Elias said that he does want to go for a strong top-half rotation starter, so a 1, 2, or 3. He wants to go after a 1, 2, or 3 guy in this offseason, which is really good to see because he wants to pair them with Bradish and Rogers so we can have Bradish, Rogers, and then another elite pitcher, which is very good to hear. I know one name or two names that are going to be on this market is Framber Valdez, who played for the Astros, and Ranger Suarez, who played for the Rangers. I would love to have either one of those guys in an Oriole uniform. Obviously, I'd rather have Framber because then you could have Bradish, Rogers, and Framber Valdez. That is an elite 1, 2, and 3 for a pitching rotation. And if those guys can be healthy going into the playoffs, and if we make the playoffs and you have those 3 guys as your 1, 2, and 3, that's a huge advantage and something that could be really, really good for the playoffs. So I would really like to go get Framber Valdez, but we'll see what happens with that. Mike Elias, he did say that the Orioles are ashamed and motivated by this season. Obviously ashamed by the record, ashamed by what happened, but motivated by the fact that they can go out and do and right their wrongs to do better and go out there and really target pitching and make this team the best that it possibly can be. Mike Elias said that Tyler Wells is a good starter or reliever, but the plan right now is to start him. I think this is what's good. I think this will be better. I would like to kind of move Cade Povich maybe to a bullpen role, and then I'd like to have Tyler Wells be I think it all depends also on what we do in terms of like our closer. I could very well see Tyler Wells being our closer, or I could see him also being like a starting pitcher in the back rotation. Obviously, let's say for example we get Framber Valdez. We could have Framber, Rogers, Bradish, then maybe like Kramer and Wells. Like that is a pretty solid 5-man rotation. You can also throw in maybe like another like starter, in there as well. But in terms of like a rotation that's very solid, it said, and then this is the one that really confused me, but he said Adley Rutschman will be the Orioles frontline catcher. I don't really understand that. They signed Samuel Basallo to a big extension, so I don't really understand that one, but we'll see what ends up happening. And then he said Grayson Rodriguez will start throwing ramp up in October. So he should be ready for camp. So seems like Grayson Rodriguez is going to start getting into the swing of things and should be ready by spring training, which is good to hear. And I do want to switch things up here and talk about the Ravens. And we're going to talk about the Ravens to end this episode. Again, it's already been over an hour recording. Went over a majority, obviously, of the Orioles season, talking about this upcoming offseason as well. But I do want to go over the Ravens just for 1 second. We do have some updates regarding some injuries to players that I do want to go over. Obviously, we talked about it at the very beginning of the episode, but Namandi Madubuike is going to be out for the remainder of the season, and obviously prayers go out to him. This is a neck injury. This is something that could affect him very, very, very long term, and this could be something that forces him to retire, and it's not really looking good right now because, at the beginning we thought it was going to be a couple weeks, then we put him on the 4-game IR, and now he is out for the rest of the season, and this could potentially be something that affects him later on down the road, just in life and just with stuff in general. So this really does suck for him. Again, prayers up to him. It really does suck that this is happening right now. And then also some other injury updates that I do want to go over is that Lamar Jackson, according to Ian Rappaport, Lamar Jackson will have tests today. He will have tests today to determine the extent of his hamstring injury and could possibly miss some time per Ian Rappaport. Again, praying that everything's good with Lamar, praying that he's going to be good, because if we don't have Lamar Jackson, I'm going to be honest, guys, if you just guys want my complete and honest opinion, if we do not have Lamar Jackson on this Ravens offense going into next week or longer, it is over. It is over. We're already going into a must-win game against the Texans. I think there's been one team in the past 20 years that's gone 1-4 and made the playoff. I know it's very, very hard to be 1-4 and even make the playoffs, but if we don't have Lamar Jackson next week or for multiple weeks, it's over. Guys, it is over. We're already dealing with so many injuries, like Calvin Noy, like obviously Madubuike being out for the season, like Travis Jones, like Broderick Washington, like all these guys, like Ronnie Stanley dealing with this little ankle injury. Isaiah Likely obviously was dealing with this foot injury, but he should be, he didn't even really, we didn't even get targeted in yesterday's game, and I don't know if it was game script or what it was, but hopefully, obviously, we'll see Isaiah Likely ramp up his activity as the weeks go on. But in terms of the defense, you have Nate Wiggins, who we don't really have any updates on right now, but Nate Wiggins seems to have a dislocated elbow, so he's probably going to be out for a few weeks because of that. He was in a sling after the game yesterday. Lamar Jackson obviously is dealing with this hamstring injury that a lot of people thought was fake because people were looking at the photo, the hamstring and the ice, and it wasn't on the hamstring and stuff like that. People thought that he quit, but apparently, according to Ian Rappaport, this is actually something serious. And John Harbaugh also confirmed earlier that he wouldn't have came into the game even if it was close because the injury kind of stopped that. And then just another injury piled upon everything else. Marlon Humphrey, who was ruled out with a calf injury on Sunday, he's expected to miss a couple of weeks. So Marlon Humphrey could miss 2 to 3 weeks. But Ian Rappaport also said that it's not as bad as it could have been. He said all of Baltimore's soft tissue injuries appear to be week to week and nothing like season ending. So that's good that it's not season ending, but still week to week injuries are not great because the Ravens are already 1-3 and they really can't afford to miss
they can't really afford to lose any more games, and they also really can't afford to miss any guys. So obviously, you're down Marlon Humphrey, you're down Nate Wiggins you're down Marlon and Nate Wiggins for a few weeks. You're down Matabike out for the year. Travis Jones is out. Broderick Washington's out. Jair Alexander's been like a healthy scratch, which I'm sure he's going to be now forced into playing time. Now it's going to be Awuzie and Jair, and Jair Alexander's also been kind of nursing a knee injury, and he's been trying to ramp up activity as well. So Jair is going to be forced to play now, which hopefully he can go out there and shine. I mean, he did in week 1, but hopefully he can go out there and shine now. You're going to have Jair being forced to play. You got Awuzie and you got TJ Tampa out there at corner right now, which might be a disaster. I don't know. Your whole D front's out. You have Calvin Noy dealing with that injury, that hamstring injury. Obviously, you have Matabike and Travis Jones and Broderick Washington all out. So your entire front line is out. Your starting front line. You have Roquan Smith dealing with a hamstring injury. We don't know how long his hamstring injury is going to be. But you have Roquan dealing with a hamstring injury. You got Ronnie Stanley dealing with an ankle injury. I mean, it's a lot. It's just a lot of injuries going on with the Ravens right now, and I mean it sucks. It sucks to be in the position they are right now. It sucks to be a team that was so heavily expected to beat. I mean, this team was literally going into the season. They were tied with Philadelphia as the Super Bowl favorites to win it all for very good reason. On paper, this team is elite. On paper, this defense should be elite. On paper, this offense should be elite. Obviously, the offense over this past week had some inconsistencies, really due to the offensive line play not really being there, and Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs defense giving the Ravens a lot of problems with the blitz. So that's why the offense was kind of out of rhythm. The play calling and short yardage situations, not using Derrick Henry, isn't really great. The red zone offense has not been nearly as good as it should be. Over the first few weeks of the season, the offense looked automatic, but they were still finding ways to lose games because the defense put so much pressure on the offense, and the offensive line just cannot be consistent enough to hold for this offense to really explode and be the way that they should be. So on paper, this team is elite, and everybody thought it would be elite, and obviously Lamar Jackson's Lamar Jackson. But, I mean, it just hasn't really – we're just not winning games like we should, and it just hasn't really gone the way that it's supposed to be. So hopefully these injuries, I mean, at this point, what you need to say is, it's just a next man up mentality. Hopefully, these guys like Aeneas Peebles and these rookies and Mike Green and guys like that can really – and Jair Alexander and – Awuzie and TJ Tampa, these guys can step up and play a big role. Hopefully this defense can really figure it out fast, and hopefully this offensive line can really also figure it out. If this defense and the offensive line can figure it out, things will be looking a lot better for this team. I trust the weapons on offense, obviously. I trust Derrick Henry. I trust all the pass catchers. I obviously trust Lamar Jackson. And I trust that this defense can hopefully get back into the swing of things. But Zach Orr's job is literally is on fire right now. If he's not on the hot seat, and if John Harbaugh obviously isn't on the hot seat, I don't know why. I just really would like to know why John Harbaugh is so untouchable with his job. But who knows? I mean, it just sucks. It sucks to be in the position you are right now. It's hard kind of climbing back at the beginning of the season. You would like to kind of have that lead early and let the season play out. But this defense is going to have to figure it out. This offensive line is going to have to figure it out. And this play calling, it just needs to be more unpredictable. Let's just say that. They're the offense right now seems a little bit predictable as the year goes on. It's having its inconsistencies with the offensive line mainly, and also the red zone and short yardage situations should be a lot more simple than we're making it. But again, offensive line needs to figure it out. Defense needs to figure it out, and things will kind of play their part and fall into place the way that they should be. But again, I'll say this again. If Lamar Jackson is going to miss time, none of it matters because we are cooked. A Cooper Rush-led offense, we will not do anything with a Cooper Rush-led offense in a Lamar Jackson system. It's gonna be rough. I would rather have Tyler Huntley play because he at least knows the system more better than Cooper Rush does, because Tyler Huntley obviously was here for a few years behind Lamar. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully Lamar Jackson is good, because as long as Lamar Jackson is my quarterback, as long as Lamar Jackson is out there, I know anything is possible with this Ravens team. But there's just been so much pressure put on this offense, lots of pressure put on him. I mean, I feel for the guy, man. I feel for the guy, because he has to put up 40 points every game to win, plus the offensive line isn't giving him a chance, and it's just tough. It's just rough out there for the Ravens. But again, thank you guys so much for tuning into this long special edition episode of Birds of a Feather. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow up on Spotify, make sure to click the link in the bio to check out the Twitter and the Instagram. We are going to be either posting later today or tomorrow about some special renditions, some special new logos, some special refurbishing to this channel and to this show. It's going to be a lot of fun, going to be a big announcement, so make sure to give the Twitter and the Instagram a follow for that. I appreciate anybody who stayed and watched the episode this long. I know it was a long episode, I know I was yapping, I know I was talking, but that's what the show is, and that's what really connects us all as Ravens and Orioles fans, is that we love these teams and love the passion that we have for these teams. So again, I appreciate you guys so much. This is episode 170 of the show, and again, I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Ravens season is officially full in gear now. With the Orioles season over, obviously, we're still going to go over Orioles off-season stuff as the things go up, and I'm going to have different segments planned out for that. But as of right now, Ravens kind of have full attention right now, which is obviously fun, of course, but there's some stuff going on with them. It's going to be a long season. But again, I appreciate you guys so much. Again, I'll see you guys tomorrow. You have a great sales day. Go O's, go Ravens, and I'll see you all later. Peace out.